At dawn on the morning of the 6th of June, 1944, 225 Rangers jumped off the British landing craft and ran to the bottom of these cliffs. Their mission was one of the most difficult and daring of the invasion: to climb these sheer and desolate cliffs and take out the enemy guns. The Rangers looked up and saw the enemy soldiers at the edge of the cliffs shooting down at them with machine guns and throwing grenades. And the American Rangers began to climb. When one Ranger fell, another would take his place. When one rope was cut, a Ranger would grab another and begin his climb again. They climbed, shot back, and held their footing. Soon, one by one, the Rangers pulled themselves over the top, and in seizing the firm land at the top of these cliffs, they began to seize back the continent of Europe.
The teamwork and determination displayed on that fateful day at Pointe du Hoc not only demonstrates the best of the United States Army, but it also represents our mission at the Association of the United States Army. Soldiers supporting soldiers. For almost 75 years, AUSA has served soldiers, providing a voice for the Army, and celebrated those who have helped the Army community. We've experienced tremendous growth and are now over 1 million members strong and growing. We continue to provide essential services to soldiers, civilians, retirees, veterans, and family members. We engage with the Army, Congress, industry partners, and communities across the globe. And we work to advance national security and promote greater recognition of the Army's vital role in American life. But we're not stopping there. We're evolving the way we educate, inform, and connect America to the Army. We're developing our Center for Leadership to inspire Army leaders. We're investing in our Army communities with a broader membership reach. And we're building stronger links between generations to support the Army's critical needs. As we charted AUSA's path for the future, we realized we needed a new symbol to represent what we do. A logo inspired by the significance of the soldier experience and the Army story. A logo inspired by our focus on people. Because, as General Creighton Abrams said, people aren't in the Army. They are the Army. A logo inspired by the achievements of those brave soldiers at Pointe du Hoc on that fateful day in 1944. This is that emblem. AUSA. It takes a team. Soldiers, families, civilians, retirees, veterans, industry, and you.
The Association of the United States Army is pleased to welcome you to AUSA's Noon Report webinar series. This webinar series features presentations by senior Army leaders responsible for key programs and initiatives. It also features contemporary military authors who weave together the past, present, and future story of the United States Army. Kicking off today's webinar is AUSA's Vice President of NCO and Soldier Programs, retired Sergeant Major of the Army, Dan Daly.
Good afternoon, and welcome to the Association of the United States Army's Noon Report. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar. We appreciate your support as partners in the defense of our nation. Joining us today is Command Sergeant Major Andrew Lombardo, the 14th Command Sergeant Major of the United States Army Reserve. Please take advantage of having Sergeant Major Lombardo here to ask questions. You can use the Q&A tab on the right side of your screen to submit a question. After the discussion, we will take as many questions as possible. You can find the full bio for Command Sergeant Major Lombardo and our moderator, Command Sergeant Major Julie Guerra, U.S. Army retired, in the Handouts tab. As stated, the moderator for today's discussion is Command Sergeant Major Julie Guerra, U.S. Army retired. Julie has a BS in Liberal Arts from Excelsior University and joined the Army in 1994 when she attended training as a counterintelligence agent. She was selected for the U.S. Army Sergeant Major's Academy in 2010. Her final assignment in the Army, after over 29 years of service, was as the Senior Intelligence Sergeant Major for the Army and Headquarters DAG-2, Pentagon. Assignments over the course of her career include Operations Sergeant Major in the 111th Military Intelligence Brigade, Battalion Command Sergeant Major for the 309th Military Intelligence Battalion, and Senior Intelligence Sergeant Major for I Corps G2 and Joint Base Lewis McChord, and the Rear Detachment CSM for the 201st Military Intelligence Brigade. Overseas, she spent time in Korea, Bosnia, and Iraq. Julie is currently serving as the Director of NCO and Soldier Programs for AUSA. Sergeant Major Guerra, over to you.
Thank you, SMA. Sergeant Major Andrew Lombardo enlisted in the U.S. Army in 1985. He is a graduate of many schools and courses, including, but not limited to, the Sergeant's Major Academy and the Army Force Management School. He also has an MS in the Administration of Justice from the University of Louisville. His assignments have included CSM of the 200th Military Police Command, Division CSM of the 99th Readiness Division, CSM of the 100th Training Division, and CSM of the 333rd Military Police Brigade, 306th Military Police Battalion, the 301st Regional Support Group, and the 1079th Garrison Support Unit. His overseas deployments have included Operation Desert Shield, Storm, Operation Joint Guard, Bosnia, Operation Joint Guardian, Kosovo, Operation Iraqi Freedom, and Operation Enduring Freedom. Sergeant Major, good afternoon and welcome to the Noon Report.
Good afternoon, Julie. It's great to see you again.
It's good to see you too.
Dan, thank you very much. It's great to be at the AUSA headquarters and stop in construction for the purposes of conducting this interview.
Just for you.
Just for me.
Yes.
That's amazing. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with your viewers today. And to, I always take every opportunity I can to speak about Army Reserve citizen soldiers. And it'd be amazing to be able to discuss the achievements and some of the challenges that we face during my 4-year tenure.
Absolutely. So to get us started, do you mind sharing a quick overview of the Army Reserve with our viewers?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Army Reserve is ready now as we shape the force of tomorrow. We're the dedicated Federal Reserve for the Army, always serving under Title 10. Right now, we're about 175,000 authorized soldiers, 11,000 civilians. We have Army Reserve soldiers in all 50 states, 5 U.S. territories. We have about 6,000 soldiers deployed right now to support Army operations throughout about 23 countries, about 2,000 in the States. And we're just, our soldiers are just a willing, ready part of the team.
No, I absolutely can appreciate that as someone that served alongside you. And also the contribution of the Reserve to the total force has always been something that I appreciated throughout my tenure. Speaking of which, coming to the end of a tenure can be daunting. We all ask ourselves, have we done enough during our time? And if we've prepared the way for our successors, can you share your thoughts on this transition period?
Oh, I've done enough. No, it's been an exciting 4 years. I'm pretty confident that the Army Reserve is in a strong position and ready to meet the challenges of the future. I'll tell you some of the, when I came into position, it was some pretty challenging times. Coming in the height of COVID, overcoming the challenges of remote training and getting back to hands-on training, implementing Army programs like the Army Combat Fitness Test, which was huge, right? And distributing equipment through about 850 facilities across the United States, as well as working through Army weapons standards and developing our 5 Army Reserve garrisons for ranges. Right. I think one of my big takeaways from that was that as a component of the total Army, that the Reserve components need to be a participant in both the planning and the execution stages of any new programs that we're going to lay out.
No, I absolutely recall when we were members of the Senior Enlisted Council together. That's right. And when the former Sergeant Major of the Army, Grinston, we were talking about the fielding of the equipment for the total force and the challenges that yourself and the National Guard were having with getting the equipment to locations so that you could be prepared for when everything went live.
Right.
So
it just so happens too that at the end of this month, it's going to be our first requirement for our first record ACFT.
Right.
And
Yeah, that's right.
And we're fully positioned to get that done. So I'm happy about that.
Absolutely. And I think to your point, making sure that the equipment part was good was key to the success of being like able to go live when you needed to.
Yeah.
So I know that filling the ranks for our all-volunteer force has been a real challenge for the DoD across the board. What are some ways the Army Reserve has gotten after strengthening the Army profession? Yeah,
sure. So it certainly has been a challenge. We're trying to meet it head on, both internally and externally, with our partners at the United States Army, Recruiting and Retention Command. So internally, what are we looking at for the profession? Right, going from right in the beginning, going from promotion boards for the senior ranks to NCO evaluation boards. We look at parity between our the regular Army. Looking at childcare, we have 4 pilot programs running right now across the United States, and we have limited success with it. Okay. But I know that going forward, that this is a high demand need, and if we can get the programs right and the care right for the weekends, that'll be huge. Competitive programs to get after war fighting. To include the best squad piece. I do want to talk about a program that General Daniels and I are talking about as far as, strengthening the profession.
Okay.
And when we came in, we realized that we had an excess of specialists versus our authorized strength. In fact, it was like 14,600, something like that.
Oh, wow.
And at the same time, we had a shortage of sergeants. Mm-hmm. So General Daniels and I looked into the process, and we realized is we had, number one, we had a culture shift, a culture piece that we needed to change. That our non-commissioned officers were looking to see if you were ready for promotion versus demonstrating the potential to be promoted. We had an archaic system that we still use in paper to fill out forms. So IPSA certainly helped us out with that. And then we needed like a bit of an education piece, training and education to communicate out to the force. And what's pretty cool, we called it, General Daniels dubbed it the E5 and 5 program, right? And pushing that out to senior leaders to emphasize her priority to develop the NCO Corps.
Right.
And where she went with this and where we're going with this is, as of December, we went from that deficit of 4,000 sergeants to meet, for the first time since 2019, actually achieving 100% of our sergeants rank, qualified non-commissioned officers. And as of today, we're about 2,000. We have about 2,000 over our structure, which is great because our junior NCOs feed our warrant officers, and sometimes they even feed our officer corps.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think that's key. And what a great, program to develop to really. It not only strengthens the profession internally by building our sergeants, but it also gives the sergeants the opportunity to really look at mentorship and development from a completely different lens than they were looking before. Yeah,
that's right. I think one of the challenges we figured out, and this was, and as you know, we probably worked a lot of this out with the former SMA, Tony Grinson, is we actually developed a process of what were the steps required to actually attain sergeant and communicate that to the force? Do you go to school before or after you go to a promotion board?
Right.
And a lot of that clarification kind of helped out as well.
Yeah, I'm sure. So it's good to hear the soldiers in the Army Reserve have senior leaders like General Daniels and yourself fighting for them. It's also good to hear about all the accomplishments, but were there any items, programs, policies that you wish you had been able to push through?
Oh yeah, I'm going to leave a lot for the incoming CSM of the
Setting
Army
them
Reserve.
up for success.
Absolutely, 100%. So I think one of the things that the Army as a whole is going to is distributive learning.
Right.
And there's some restrictions on the reserve components for the amount of credit that we can get while we're in a non-duty status doing distributed learning, and that's regulated up at the DoD level.
Right.
So if I could, I would have liked to change that. There's a restriction of 36 hours per year. So imagine you're going to the Sergeant Major Academy, distance learning. It's a couple of hundred hours of education.
Right.
But we're only able to credit them with pay for about 36 hours. So I think it would be nice if we could look at that at the DoD level. If the next Sergeant Major of the Army Reserve could look at that along with our counterparts in the other reserve components. Right. I think it's important as we leverage the reserve components to do more and more service, or if we need them for contingencies to achieve our national objectives, that if they're required to perform more than what we typically ask them to do, the 2 weeks and the drill periods, that we consider the employers, and maybe we can compensate the employers for that extra time that they're away. And there's been some legislative proposals that have not really come to pass.
Yeah.
That would maybe give some incentives to the employers for their sharing their talent with the Army. Right. And I think that would be a key to take away as well.
And has this, I'm sure it has this been crowdsourced through the employers? Like, what's their take on it? I'm sure that they love this premise.
I mean, I could, just from my experience, I
Right.
mean, we have some amazing support from the employers across the United States sharing talent, but after a period of time, it can be stressful.
Yeah.
And I'm sure this will go a long way to, maintaining that trust with our employers,
Right.
so that we can share that talent. I think there is a call for that. I think there's a will to do it. It's just, I think we just need some help to get that.
No, absolutely.
out.
I can see that. When I was the Brigade Sergeant Major, we had a reserve battalion in California, and that was aligned with our organization. And I remember the battalion sergeant major having that discussion with me about, for these contingency operations and rotational deployments, what this strain of that talent sharing, to your point, with the employer, how trying to balance that as the leaders, along with the soldiers, was a really difficult task.
Right.
So that's good. That would be good if that comes to fruition. We're going to go out to you all and see if there's any questions at this time. Okay, so first one up, Marcus, thank you for your question. How is the Army Reserve preparing their units for LISCO? And what do Army Reserve senior leaders project the role of Army Reserve units within LISCO?
Okay, that's a good curveball question.
It is.
So, so the Army Reserve trains. We have about 39 days a year to conduct training. So one of the things that General Daniels and I talk about is number one, we have to be focused on what we do during those 39 days that we're together, right? We have to be laser focused or have a lean towards training versus administrative requirements. So what we're really what we need to do is get units out of their reserve centers, get them, number one, to understand the doctrine, dispersion, and how we fight, to integrate with our other components, because we're a support echelon. And that could include what we're doing is we're looking at exercises, whether that's in UCOM or the PACOM AOR. But specifically for the time that we're within our units is doing those individual tasks that support battle tasks, that support METs, right? I mean, it's basic. And where I spend my time is looking at training schedules to make sure that the units are actually focused on that, their mission that they're going to be required to perform should they be called. And to maybe even look at culture change to make sure that they understand that there may be a limited time for train up, and they may actually have to be ready at notification,
right,
with the equipment that they have.
No, absolutely, I can totally.
I appreciate that question, though.
No, that's a great question. Thank you, Marcus. Lieutenant Colonel Geno, I'm sorry if I'm saying your name wrong. Berta, now with the 647th RSG in Wichita, Kansas.
Okay.
My question is, what can we do as TPU soldiers to assist our recruiting teammates in spreading the word about the opportunities for young people to serve in our Army? And shout out to all us 1079th GSU alums.
There you go. That's awesome. So I appreciate the question, sir. So what General Daniels and I, number one is, so when I say TPU soldier, what that means is a citizen soldier. For the Army National Guard, it would be an M-Day soldier. It's a part-time soldier. The number one thing you could do, number one, is give soldiers realistic training when they show up, so that they can be our mouthpiece and our voice to the American communities where they live across, 2,000 communities across the United States. If we as leaders, if we give them the opportunity to be experts in their craft, to be members of a cohesive team, to demonstrate discipline and fitness, I think when they get done with their battle assembly, they're going to go into their communities and they'll be the biggest recruiting partners that we need if they could share those experiences.
Absolutely.
Now, units can also partner with their local recruiting battalions, retention battalions. There's nothing that says that commanders have discretion to either loan equipment, participate with recruiters at events and community events to also share our story.
Well, and I think I'm gonna pull the thread a little bit. When you talked about discipline, fit, and cohesive teams, one of the best indicators of that is the best squad.
That's right.
So can you talk a little bit about how the Army Reserve did their best squad competition to compete at the Army level?
Sure, absolutely. So we're a dispersed force.
I do.
And I had an inclination that we were going to go that direction.
Mm-hmm.
I knew it was going to take a little bit of time for us. So before we as a total Army executed the best squad, I tried to do it a year before, just to work out the bugs on it. And we did that up at Fort McCoy, Wisconsin. And what we do is we have 28 direct reporting commands, And the initial year, what we tried to do is we did it at a meta level, right? And it was more of a best, like an all-star team attempt, right? And then we got some further direction to bring it down a level. So so what we're pushing forth now is, you know, we're actually getting teams of 5 to go up to the Army level and compete. And we're holding our own. We're holding on.
They did very well.
Yeah,
they did. They did very well. I think. Well, all the squads did.
That's
it was. It was a great competition to see. The first year that I did it as a board member, and being able to see kind of how it went from the best warrior to the best squad, and then in year 2, kind of how it even evolved further. So yeah, I'm very excited about this year's competition.
You know, training is obviously it's right within our wheelhouse, right? And I've had some experiences in the past where I may have not been as trained as I wanted to be when I was thrust into a situation.
Absolutely.
So one of my passions is to make sure that we give the opportunities for our soldiers to get that tough, realistic training before we have to ask them to do their jobs. And one of the things that we're going to do, you know, the Total Army's looking at that E3B piece, the Expert Soldier Badge, the Expert Field Medical Badge, and the EIB. We have not been able to do that to date because we're mostly a maneuver and a support force.
Right.
But this year in May, for the first time, we're going to actually hold an E3B. Our inaugural E3B up at Fort McCoy, Wisconsin.
Yeah,
And that's
awesome.
for the total force, too. So if anybody wants to register for that, they could certainly look into the Army Reserve webpage and register for that. We'd love to have members of the Army National Guard and members of the regular Army involved as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So on that note, what is your leadership philosophy and what or who inspired it?
My leadership philosophy. It's a couple things. Number one is, I would say transparency, fairness, and I think I alluded to it before, is a passion for training our soldiers. And I'd have to tell you take you back to a war story in you know, the Persian Gulf War.
I love a good war story.
That's right.
Let's go.
All right. So as I'm flying in on my commercial aircraft and I'm landing on the ground, and I was notified on, I think it was Christmas Eve for a mobilization on January 3rd. We did not have a lot of train up time back then.
Okay.
Because of rapidly unfolding events. And as I'm landing, a couple missiles hit the ground on the airfield and the alarm started going off. And at that time, you know, I had a thought, and luckily it wasn't the thought of a piece of, you know, shrapnel going through me or anything like that. It was just, am I ready? Can I get my equipment on time? And as I'm fumbling to get my mask on and at that point, it's a MOP suit, right? Or a JLIS suit. And we sit in a bunker, it's 140 degrees. I said, am I ready for this? And I swore if I was ever going to get out of this thing, I would make sure that I would provide the best possible training to my soldiers from that point forward.
Absolutely.
And that's kind of been my driving passion, I think.
That's great. And it ties right back into Best Squad.
There you go.
Which we just talked about.
There you
Amazing. Gary has a question. He's submitting an application for Army Reserve Ambassador for the state of Missouri. Served 32 years with the Army Reserve, 13 years as a TPU soldier, and 19 years on AGR as a reserve recruiter. What would be your top 3 areas that Army Reserve ambassadors can focus on to assist the Army Reserve the most efficiently?
Okay, great. Top 3. Okay, so first, Gary, thank you for submitting your application. So an Army Reserve ambassador is the Army Reserve's equivalent to a CASA.
Oh, okay.
So they represent the Army Reserve and tell our story to the community. So the top 3, I see number 1 is talking to state legislators. And from a reserve component perspective is if they create legislation that supports either veterans or members of the reserve component, that they include the reserve in that. Be engaged in community events to be able to share our stories and be an ambassador, to tell what service in the Army Reserve is about, why we do it, and what the expectations are. And the only other one is just be connected with the Army Reserve so you can be aware of updates of what we're doing so you can communicate that to the field. I think those would be the 3 I would think about. And maybe I'm missing something.
No, that's great. I think those are really good top 3. One of the focus areas that SMA Weimer talks about is a call to service.
Call to service, sure. And
that really ties into Gary's question. One of the things that I speak about, especially now that I've recently transitioned, is in a lot of places there's a lack of connectedness with the community. And our motto here at AUSA is to inform, connect, and educate. And the connection part we're really focusing on with the chapters, the installations. Sure. So can you talk a little bit more about how as a call to service, we can all either as a soldier for life or serving as the reserve or guardsman or active component, what we can contribute to the community in our service.
I mean, it's a good question. I think it goes back to what we spoke about before and about telling your story.
Yeah.
Right. We all have a story to tell, and we all have some amazing experiences. I mean, the Army's done the services, the uniformed services have given us opportunities that we never would have achieved if we did not serve.
Right.
And when I talk to people in the community, many people, like, one of the regrets that they have is never serving.
Mm-hmm.
So if we can communicate what those positive aspects of service, what they gave to us, for example, it paid for my college degree, right? It many of my friends are through military services. Some of my best friends through shared hardship and shared experiences.
Right.
I think you tell those stories to the American community, I think you'll make an impact.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think there are so many compelling Army stories.
Right.
If you just ask someone, like, what's your Army story or why did you join the Army, you're going to get a variety of stories and reasons and then why they stayed. Like, not just why you joined, but why you continued to serve. And I think that is telling the Army story, and it's incredibly the American people connect with that as mothers and fathers and guardians of the next generation of American soldiers. I think that's important.
So my boss has impressed this upon me. When how many people ever thank you for your service? Quite a few, right?
Right.
And I think what she impressed upon me is that's probably the point where you should probably engage in the conversation and actually tell and inform and educate. And maybe that's one way we could do that.
Oh yeah, instead of just saying thank you and moving out. Yeah, no, that's a really good point. Thank you, General Daniels, for that. Okay, Michael has a question about the development at the junior NCO level. Can you speak on developing senior NCOs, especially those going to the Sergeant Major course?
Okay. So, yes, I can. So last year, what we took a look at, most of my soldiers that go, and I'll speak specific to the reserve components. Most of the large majority of my soldiers go through the distance learning course, which is a 2-year course. And it's pretty intensive because you're balancing that with your family life and you're balancing that with your civilian employment because you still got to put food on the table, right, while you're doing this stuff. So when we took a look at it, we noticed there's a lot of drops and a lot of, the commitment of the academy was too much for them. And they didn't know what they were getting into before they did it. So last year we implemented a course. My team helped me out at the USAC headquarters, and we worked with the Army National Guard because they've been running a course for quite some time. And what this does is this preps them for, and it informs them about what the expectations are going to be, what the consequences of not keeping up in the course are going to be, and it introduces them to their distance learning instructors and stuff like that. And I think that's gone a long way for us as a component, because what we need to do is we need the soldiers that we send to school to graduate. We're looking at developing a mentorship program and joining the Army with some of our full-time support personnel to become mentors for those that are enrolled in the Sergeant's Major Academy, so they could talk about career development and what happens after the academy.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
What are some programs of excellence that the Army Reserve provides to enlisted and officers? Okay,
awesome. Programs of excellence. It's a great question. Thank you. So in addition to the best squad, the best warrior, which we all know about, right? Because we still have an individual as well as the squad.
Right.
Specific for the reserve, we host a inter-allied reserve officers course. It's a military competition.
Okay.
And I'm probably getting the acronym wrong, but it's
all right.
It's French and it's CIOR.
And no one knows but you, so it's fine.
Well, they all know. So, but what we do is and this is primarily for officers, but it also includes non-commissioned officers, and they act as ambassadors to do a military competition as well as, and there's a medical one, and they interact mostly with NATO allies, or NATO affiliates. Okay. And they're involved as ambassadors of the U.S. Army, and they do a military competition with that. We also do the Broadening Opportunities Program, which is an Army program, which is which is awesome. Unfortunately, we don't have a lot of people taking part of that. I need to get more. So when you see the MILPER message come out, I'd appreciate if you apply for it if you're interested.
Javier has a question. What do you consider your legacy during your term as the Army Reserve Command Sergeant Major? That's a great question.
That is a great question, Javier, and I actually know who you are, and I miss you, brother. But my legacy, I think, well, I would like to be remembered for somebody that had a passion for tough training and getting us, along with General Daniels, obviously, and my entire team, back to training with a focus on being able to support the total force with MDO. I think that's it.
Well, on your legacy, inquiring minds want to know who's backfilling you as the Sergeant Major of the Army Reserve.
That's the million-dollar question, and I was really hoping to have that answer for you today, but at this point, I don't know. So
he doesn't know, folks. Stop asking. Stop asking.
What I can tell you is my understanding is that there is a Chief of Army Reserve select, but they haven't been confirmed, and as a result, they're conducting interviews with 10 highly qualified applicants. Now, I can tell you, I've looked at the applications, and I'm confident that they have the skills necessary to bring this component forward. And they're part of, every one of them is part of my senior enlisted council. And one of the things I'm proud about doing is exposing them to what I do. I've been very transparent about what I do and how I interact with the senior enlisted council, the SMA, and try to include them into the process of what we work. So I'm highly confident that they're able to. I'm sure they'll face some new challenges. Everybody does. Right. But once we find out, we'll let you know.
Okay, we're standing by. Michael has a question. Understanding that citizen warriors must maintain a positive relationship with their civilian employer, which you talked about, how do you and the command team interact with and utilize the employee support of the Guard and Reserve? And he said, whoa.
Yeah, whoa. So the employee support for the Guard and Reserve are a bunch of civilian ombudsmen. Maybe that's what I'm going to do when I'm done with this too. And what they do is they'll interact with employers to basically inform and educate about the Uniformed Services Employment Reemployment Rights Act. How do I interact with them? Number one, if it's brought to my attention through the NCO support channel that an employer has, that a soldier has an issue with an employer, I'll certainly reach out to ESGR. It's an amazing resource. I've personally used them a couple different times just to educate the NYPD, who's also an amazing organization, by the way, and supports me completely while I do this. I do think, just to pivot a little bit, is I think we could use some support. One of the things I notice is, through all components, our spouses often work and have jobs, and sometimes they are unable to perform their duties when we deploy. Right. And I think it would be helpful if we could educate and we can get some protections for them while our members in any component deploy. Because I mean, if you have to stop your work to take care of the household while one of us is deployed, right? I don't know how often an employer, or if they understand that burden that we face. So it'd be helpful to get some protections.
Yeah, that would be great. Yeah. Jamie asked, what areas do you think that the veteran service organizations could do a better job of helping service members in and out of the reserves?
I think the veteran service agencies do an amazing job. I'm actually working with them right now. Right. So for the reserve, I know there was a study recently about disability benefits. And I know that there may have been some statistical disparities between the regular Army and the reserve components. I think the VSOs, if they were able to communicate with the reserve components and maybe able to identify, if they were injured in the line of duty or stuff like that, and how to claim that and get appropriate compensation for that, that would go a long way.
Yeah, that's great.
Ooh, like rapid fire session.
Like rapid fire, I know that we're on it. This isn't a question, but Sergeant Major retired John Sampa.
There he is.
Great friend.
I just saw him last week too. Yeah. He didn't make me ride we were down at the Houston rodeo. He didn't, this year I didn't ride a horse. He made me ride a horse the year before. It was the second time in my life I ever ridden a horse. It was amazing.
Well, there's not a lot of horse, unless you're one of the NYPD that rides the horse.
The mounted unit.
That's right. That's right. Which
maybe I'll be the commanding officer.
There you go. All right. Now John's giving you training. Thank you, John, for getting Andrew on a horse. Thank you for your service, dedication, and being a great enlisted leader for the Army Reserves.
It's a pleasure to serve with you.
He enjoyed working with you, as did I, while serving as the National Guard Sergeant Major. And he thanks you for everything that you did, and congratulations on a job well done.
Thanks. You're a great battle buddy. It was a pleasure working with you. I hope we maintain our friendship in the future. I look forward to riding on the hayride.
Carlos asked, what has been the most eye-opening or humbling leadership lesson you learned as the Army Reserve Sergeant Major? That's a good one.
That's a really good one.
Yeah, let's go. Let's get in it.
I think the most humbling lesson is so I'm sitting with General Daniels, and I'm trying to explain to the brigade and battalion pre-command course, and we're trying to give some mentorship advice, and I was like, when you're a sergeant major, you no longer have a lane, you have a highway. And she turned over to me and said, Sergeant Major, you don't have a highway, you have a nation. And I thought that was pretty humbling and empowering at the same time.
Right.
And I was like, that's pretty much stuck with me I think it's going to stick with me forever. That was amazing.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
And then, so how did you adjust based on the highway and nation analogy that was used?
Yeah.
How did you adjust the way that you led based on that lesson?
Well, first of all, it's empowering.
Yeah.
Right. But with empowerment comes a lot of responsibility. And I think my leadership style at this level, it's less finger pointing, and it's more of coalition building.
Yeah, absolutely.
To an extent. And I think that, yeah, that was, I think every enlisted leader needs to hear that.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
So from a coalition building, what was the most collaborative thing that you were able to do while serving in this role?
Yeah, I'll say, so coalition building is probably in three different angles. Number one is with our counterparts, regular Army in the SMA SEC. Number two is probably with the reserve components at the DoD level.
Mm-hmm.
And then number three is probably with our 5I partners.
Okay.
Collaboration, what I thought was something fairly significant, like right at the outset, is educational benefits. So working with the SEAC at DoD and the SMA, I've received a complaint or online a concern that our soldiers in the reserve and the guard and even the other reserve components weren't able to use the reserve GI Bill along with tuition assistance. Now, in the regular Army, you could use them both concurrently.
Right.
And so, but that was stuck somewhere at a policy level up at DoD.
Okay.
And with the help of the SMA and with the SEAC, we were able to work together to actually allow or to get our reserve component soldiers to use both concurrently.
Yeah, that's great. That's a huge
Put me on the
accomplishment.
spot there.
Yeah.
Okay.
You're welcome.
That's good.
You're welcome. That's what I'm here for. Kelly asked, how can the Army enhance and tailor family programs to effectively address the specific research challenges experienced by Army Reserve soldiers and their families, ensuring their well-being and support during both military and transition in the civilian population?
Oh, wow. That's a mouth.
It is.
It's a mouthful. Kelly. How can the Army Reserve...
How can they enhance and tailor family programs? Okay.
So I know we have a family programs section. I think it's important that we integrate. Now, our soldiers, family support groups are a big help. What we do is we coalesce when we mobilize, and through that yellow ribbon program, I think is the best part or the best point to actually implement and notify our soldiers, because that's when our families have the most interest in the military, because it at that point it takes over their entire family's lives.
Right.
So I think both through this yellow ribbon program, enhancing it and advising families of programs during that process and during the demobilization process is probably where we get the most bang for the buck.
Right.
Articulating FSRGs as well is very important.
Yeah, and you talked a little bit about how you were developing childcare options for during battle drill assemblies on the weekends.
That's right, and annual training too.
Right.
And one of the challenges that we're going to have for that is, and we're working with DoD and G9 and stuff like that, is weekend service. So anything that leaders can do, whether it's at the congressional level or wherever, that could help us or influence the availability of having childcare workers during weekends or during annual training for 24 hours, like what they have at Fort Jackson, for example.
The drill sergeants,
the drill sergeants would be helpful for our soldiers.
No, I can say that as a mother who
Yeah.
has 12 years of my daughter's life, we were dual military. I think that being able to have good childcare, safe childcare, reliable childcare, so that you can serve your country is it's key, and it's also necessary.
It's a little nuanced, not just with us, but also imagine your recruiters that are out in local communities. They don't have the availability of a child care center.
Right.
So what the reserve components need is some type of hybrid that they can get in-home care in their communities. So,
Right.
so that's what we look at for our pilots is where can we get in-home care in your local community when you're on doing weekend duty or 2-week duty. And that relieves the burden of either the spouse or a family member. And it actually strengthens that family unit and it enables them to continue serving.
Yeah, that's great. I can appreciate that. Gary asked, do you ever imagine that the Army Reserve retirement process will allow for a reservist with 20 years of qualifying part-time service to be able to draw a retirement check at that time rather than waiting until the age of 60?
Probably not, but who knows? I mean, that's what I can tell you. I mean, there's some historical precedents for reducing it, right? So what you may not know is if we don't have 20 qualifying years, we qualify for a non-regular retirement, and we get a portion, a proportional portion of what we served at age 60.
Right.
Now, based upon the type of federal service we do on orders, we're able to reduce that. And after a certain period of time, it may be 2008, but after a certain period of time, we're able to reduce that in increments of 90 days reduce it to up to age 50, down to age 50 from 60. I don't know if there's going to be an appetite to reduce it lower for the 20-year portion. But I would say that, most of our members, I would encourage you to stay longer because, you could serve up to age 60 in the U.S. Army Reserve. We don't have QMP right now, and I don't anticipate having that in the future.
Okay. Marcus asked, what is the future challenge the Army Reserve faces, and how can leaders at lower echelon prepare to combat this challenge?
Well, we have a change of security strategy, and the global commons have changed, right? So we have near-peer threats. So we can't rely on a model where we spend 90 days to 6 months getting ready after we're mobilized. So the way you can help is by preparing your people before they mobilize.
Right.
I will say, I think the Army needs to recognize that if that is the case and they do want us to do that, and that is the expectation, I think they need to apply the resources necessary to enable us to do that. And that could look like parts, it could look like training dollars. But I think the resources need to match the strategy, and that would be helpful at a policy level. But at the leadership level, I think we just need to get with that tough, realistic training done safely and maximize the time we have available to get after war fighting.
Okay, great. This is not a question, but Colonel Kenneth King said, you have had a fantastic and storied career. Thank you for your service. Over your many years of service, what is your favorite memory of military service? So I guess there is a question in there.
Sure.
That's a great one. Thank you, Kenneth.
So, sir, thank you. So, obviously, since you asked me the question, it's going to have to be our time in Iraq and serving under your leadership. And it was an absolute pleasure. My favorite memory of serving is I can't give you one. I would say it's all the connections I made throughout. And that's one of the greatest, probably best kept secrets about military service is because we operate in teams and because the esprit de corps that we have as an organization. I think that when I leave, that's what you're going to remember the most is the people that you were able to connect to during the 38 years that I served. I don't know if that's a straight up answer, sir, but that's what I got for you.
That's a great one. So Frank asks, how can the Army Reserve provide better support to the Joint Force in the cyber domain? Are there some innovative programs that Army Reserve leadership has considered that could enable the Reserve to leverage cyber talent in the business sector or academia to provide greater capacity to the Joint Force?
Yeah, it's a great question. I don't know that I have an answer to that, but I'm pretty, if I was king for a day, I have some pretty flexible. I mean, maybe we need to look at some flexible ways to serve.
Right.
I think the lead on this is going to be the Space Force and the way they're looking at different models of service, especially when it comes to technology. And maybe the Army could look at a thing or two with that, but remains to be seen. I could say we're definitely looking at structure for 2040. General Daniels is heavily involved in that. I know this year's R-Struct was recently approved. I know it mostly focuses on the regular Army. I know the reserve components in the Army National Guard and the reserve will probably be looked at future dates. Cyber is certainly a capability that I think we could leverage as a reserve component, and I look forward to see what comes of it. But I appreciate the question.
Okay, Michael is a lifelong student and practitioner of leadership.
Uh-oh.
One primary aspect of successful leadership is the ability to be vulnerable.
Mm.
As a successful leader yourself, how and where do you demonstrate this leadership trait?
Vulnerable? I would probably say authenticity is where I would demonstrate it, and just leveling with people is probably what I would say.
Yeah.
Probably, I guess my vulnerability would be lack of a filter. Which
say it ain't so.
Say it ain't so. So I would, and I don't know if that qualifies it as leadership is something I study.
Yeah, no, that's great. I think you can show vulnerability in many ways.
Sure.
I know I had a boss one time that was an incredible introvert, but he was a practiced extrovert. And his vulnerability on how he led every single day was being able to operate in that space.
Sure.
That he was completely uncomfortable
So you're talking
with.
about blind spots then,
Yeah,
basically,
well,
right?
yeah.
Or focusing, right.
It could be a blind spot.
Sure.
It could also be an incredible vulnerability, like personally.
Yeah.
Being able to stand in front of people and do speeches and communicate, even something like this,
Sure.
Could be incredibly uncomfortable for some people.
Maybe citizen soldier service could be a vulnerability, and you step up to the plate and raise your right hand and take that first step, or even maybe joining a service could be a method of overcoming a vulnerability.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Can you speak about, Travis asked, talent management in the reserve with respect to the variety of civilian professional backgrounds available to leverage for the Army?
Okay. So maybe. So we have 11,000 civilians to include a category of civilians that we call military technicians. And military technicians have to, I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, but they have to have dual service. So you actually serve part-time as a reserve soldier, but then when you're on Monday, you have some type of an affiliated civilian job, whether it be an HR specialist or a training NCO or a SOTS, which is an acronym that means something. So we have that category of stuff. So I think we have a lot of opportunities to leverage. We have what we call WG workers, wage grade workers. So work at our equipment concentration sites and our repair sites for vehicles as well, which is huge. There are some things I would have liked to get done with that. For example, our civilian workers that are dual status, they are not eligible to get Army Reserve health care. So they have the federal healthcare system.
Okay.
I think it would be great if they had both.
Yeah.
I think that'd be an awesome thing. And they're also not eligible for Army Reserve bonuses because they get civilian pay wage. Grade bonus. So it's a great program because it's like dual service in the same organization, but it'd be great if they can get those bonuses too.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of opportunities, and I certainly encourage it. And it's a great career with great benefits. Take a look at it.
Okay, Valerie, what are your thoughts on the call to active duty program? And how it feeds into the Army Reserve 2 active duty? And secondary, what's the success rate of bringing Army Reserve soldiers into full-time service?
Okay, good question. So I'm a supporter of it in general. Our success rate's great. We bring a lot of reserve soldiers into the regular Army, and it's important that we do that. What I would ask though is that our soldiers that have a commitment complete their commitment and either re-enlist or get towards the back end of their service to go into the regular Army. I think it's a great program. It's fully supported.
Okay, great. I do too.
Good.
I think it's great. Yeah.
And I also
Not that you care what I think, but if you did,
no, but
I love it.
I like the other way around too, as well.
Right.
Too. So and one of the things that we talk about also when we talk to leaders out there is that the continuum of service, right?
Absolutely.
So if you're about to ETS or what we would call transitioning as opposed to getting out, we'd ask that you consider continuing service in one of the reserve components as well.
Yeah, no, I'm a huge proponent of that.
And that goes throughout your lifestyle, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
As a leader, I had many soldiers that I encouraged to transition, that you can still serve for whatever reason. They didn't want to do the active duty thing anymore, but the reserve was based on their situation, their life, their career path. That was something that was a very good fit. So absolutely encourage that.
Just so a lot of people, when they go into a recruiting station, for example, I don't know, maybe the recruiters say, hey, listen, try it out in the reserve. And then they get hooked and they're like, I love it, right? And I think it's amazing to be able to enable that soldier to continue their service, in the regular Army. I think that's amazing. Yeah,
no, I agree. So, team, I see that there's more questions on the screen. I can't get to all of you, but I'm going to finish with Jamie's question. Are there any ways that you can envision mobilization time-wise that could be expedited given many of the total Army's key enablers for theater opening operations reside in the reserves?
Whoa.
That's big.
That's
Good job, Jamie.
Yeah.
Bringing it home.
Yeah. So our mobilization process is somewhat complicated. And I know the 7 commanders of the reserve component and the Reserve Forces Policy Board have been pushing or asking for mobilization reform to streamline the amount of authorities to about 4. That could reduce, if enacted, it would require an immense changing of laws and regulations. But if enacted, it could make the reserve component more responsive to the needs of the nation. And I think mobilization reform is one way to do it. I know what General Daniels looks at is she and I monitor timelines for known commitments to make sure our soldiers have orders on time so that they can go, and our commanders are aware of it for known commitments. It's those emergent ones that we really need some flexibility. Our leaders need some flexibility, I think.
No, that makes complete sense. I can appreciate that. Yeah. Everyone that tuned in today, thank you so much for all the questions and for really contributing to this great conversation between the two of us. Sergeant Major Lombardo, thank you so much for your time today. It was really good to sit here and have a great conversation about our Army.
Yeah.
And I welcome you back anytime to talk to us. SMA Daily, I will turn the floor back over to you.
Sergeant Major Lombardo, thank you for a great discussion. And more importantly, thanks for your incredible service to the United States Army Reserve. Before we part, I want to inform our viewers of a few upcoming events. AUSA will host a coffee series on 13 March featuring General Charles Hamilton, the Commanding General of U.S. Army Materiel Command. On 18 March, AUSA will host another coffee series featuring Major General Mark Bennett, the Director for Army Budget, Office of the Assistant Secretary of the Army. Our Global Force Symposium and Exposition will be on 26 through 28 March in Huntsville, Alabama. And registration is still open. AUSA will host a coffee series on 3 April featuring the Honorable Gabe Camarillo, Undersecretary of the Army. I hope you can join us for an upcoming webinar or event. For more information about any of these events or to register, please visit our website at ausa.org. Finally, we thank all of you who support us with your membership. Membership matters. You help us support the Army. Thank you again for attending, and have a great Army Day.